Hello friends, I'm very excited today to bring to you a very special knife from Muthos Homura, directly from Japan. It usually excites me, and I do aim to bring to you the unique products on the market. They are so unique and stand out in a way that they're able to outperform their competition. I did a few months back a detailed long review of the Muthos Homura MH-015, the Prominence. Both are Prominence, but this model, the shorter one, is MH-001, and then based on the feedback from this, they came out with an MH-015. When I reviewed this knife, I was in awe. I was very, very pleasantly surprised with its performance. Both of them have asymmetrical grinds, which means they are saber ground on one side and convex on the other, and a very nice lens type of convex grind on the other side. And they do not have a secondary bevel, which is good. If you know how to sharpen your knives, you get more performance in terms of cutting from a direct full down to the cutting edge geometry rather than a secondary bevel, in my experience at least. So the MH-001, as you can see, is significantly shorter, but it had beautiful performance, and hands down no other knife in my collection. And I'm more of a fixed blade guy. I have a huge collection of fixed blades, and 95% of them are bushcraft, outdoors oriented knives, not survival knives. So I have plenty of convex grinds. I've got saber grinds, flat grinds, full flats, etc. Price ranges very similar to this. I've got bark rivers and many other well-respected and established in the field of bushcraft. None of them could perform anywhere close to the MH-001. The MH-015 comes at a longer size, same blade thickness, with slight but very welcome refinements on the handle side, some chamfered edges for comfort, but most importantly, increased weight for chopping and increased length for a more capable and comfortable batoning experience. So I strongly suggest that you do go and watch the detailed review of the MH-001 of Muthos Homura. But now my expectation is very simple. Very, very capable. So far the king of batoning in my collection. I think this guy will dethrone the MH-001. I've got dogs running around, so I do need to sheath the knives when I set them down. We don't want their paws to get hurt. Okay, enough. We said hello, enough. What I have here is all seasoned hardwood, about 3 years old. We have some wild pear and oak. I tried to select gnarly pieces with knots and wavy grain pattern because we do not want to baby this knife. We're testing it. So let's start with one of the nasty pieces. And as I said, the smaller version comes to about here, and while you can still baton, you have way more leverage with this one. And despite this being a nasty piece of wood, I expect it to split without any hiccups. I mean, just goes down like butter. Why I suggest that you watch the review of the shorter version also is I explain how the blade edge behaves when you're hitting the spine. Because it is rounded, convex on one side and flat on the other, it kind of does a twisting motion. If you know how to split wood with an X, a good splitting X should have a convex, and you do a mechanical twist right by the point of hitting the log, a tiny twist. It takes some practice and could be dangerous if you don't know what you're doing, or you could break the axe. But that tiny bit of loosening in your wrist and grip and allowing the blade to twist slightly is what pops off the pieces from a larger log. This does it mechanically, where you don't have to do anything, just hit from the top and it does a little twist. Barely noticeable in your grip, but it does that, and it splits the wood like butter. I mean, look at it. And we're splitting a knotted section, right? There we go. Too easy. Another knotted section. Just as I said, on the shorter version, while the splitting action is identical pretty much, because you have shorter leverage, it is not as comfortable as this one. And I love the shorter version by all means, but I mean, this is just a new king. So let's go thick here. You see it's gnarly, not here, and just wavy pattern. So I'll go wide that way. There was a knot, that's why it took it a minute. So let's split that knotted section again. Nasty, nasty piece of wood here. A knot, another knot. Let's see how we do here. I mean, the length of the blade is just perfect for batoning because it allows good leverage. Done. And this is not oak, it is not wild pear, it's another type of even harder wood from the forests around here. It creates very high temperature coal, and because of that it is very good wood to use in the smoker. Very hard wood. But the knife has absolutely no issue splitting it. This wood dulls axes, breaks axes. See, we were going through a knot, but that action split away that side of the wood. And once it goes through, unless there is a huge knot, I mean, you see how far down it splits. There we go, man. Crazy wood splitter, and definitely more capable than the MH-015, while both are beautiful knives. Now this one comes with a wooden handle. Both actually come with a wooden handle, but they do have an option of a very nice G10, this hammered texture scale. When we go on the desktop section of the review, I will exchange. So I will put this onto the MH-015, the G10 scales, because I see me using this for more vibrating tasks, heating and batoning and such, more than the MH-015. So let's get the fire steel out. Both of these knives have very sharp spine. So let's demonstrate that, making some feathers and then start a fire. You see, nice curls, beautiful thin curls with the spine. But of course, the convex grind will also do beautiful feathers and curls, thin or thick. So because this is flat and this is convexed, it's very easy to catch the cutting edge there and then just follow through to make your curls. Chiseling away. Let's get a finer end a straighter piece for the feathers. Now we have enough to get a little fire going, but we do need some very fine shavings. So let's do that with a spine. There we go, that should be enough. There we go. Now we have fire. So, checking the handle, no loosening, the handle is intact, no cracking, and we will see this on the desktop review. And the blade edge, let's see how it shaves. Plenty of bolt shaved off. So I already know how this steel performs, and it does very well, as expected at 60 HRC, very similar to LMAX. Very comfortable, nice grip. Let's do a little bit of chopping, and then we'll move to the desktop review. Goes very deep in the wood, takes good chunks out. The grip is good and significantly improved on the first model. Does very well, and as I said, it goes rather deep in the wood. So a good chopper, nice belly. This is the section I'm using. You can also do the belly, and it will cut even deeper than the straight section. There you go. Now, if it was convex from both sides, it would not have such deep and straight cuts, but this flat or saber grind helps it go in, and then the convex pushes off. So beautiful. Okay, friends, let's do the desktop review of the Muthos Homura MH-015 now. I thought it was befitting. I'm wearing my G-Shock MTG B1000, both made in Japan products. So you saw some of the wood splitting footage outside, and this just is a beastly knife for wood splitting and for chopping as well. For its size, which it's not that long, it has some heft and weight to it. Let me quickly measure. The spine is 5.5 millimeters, and that in inches is 0.21 inches, and I believe this should be the same, the MH-001, so 5.6 it's measuring. 0.1 millimeters thinner is the larger one, the MH-015. I'm not sure that that will be consistent, maybe a batch thing, but barely noticeable. And I quickly wanted to measure just to give you an idea. So the handles, basically, the handle length is slightly longer on the MH-015 because they have changed the shape here, which to me this is a welcome change, definitely. Not a bad grip on the MH-001, but this notch here adds just a more comfortable and a secure grip in punching, piercing kind of motion, reverse hold. And let me see, yeah, even here I do prefer this because the notch is brought closer to the scale, whereas here the steel protrudes beyond the scale and may be uncomfortable. Comparatively, it's not bad, but if you remembered and if you haven't watched the detailed review of this, I suggest that you do. It's a very good knife, but I had to do little tweaks, like these edges were sharp, so I had to break that down with a fine grit sandpaper, including these holes here. They were just drilled and left sharp. All of that has been corrected and improved on the MH-015. Now I want to quickly measure the cutting edge, and it is approximately 145 millimeters, 5.71 inches, so 5.7 inches on the cutting length. And for the shorter brother or son, actually this would be the son because they first brought out the MH-001. So the cutting edge on this one is approximately 4.3 inches, and in millimeters 110-ish millimeters, yeah, about 110 millimeters. So the size difference is significant. None of the scales are hollowed, so there's no weight reduction here, but especially in the case of MH-015 they needed to do that to kind of balance the knife out. And let's see where the balance point is. It's somewhere around here, and that will change, and this will be lighter, so the balance point would shift a bit forward if I kept the wooden scales on. But when I first requested the MH-001 came with these wooden scales, and I also asked, because they do have these options for their G10, they are calling these hand hammered texture, and they also have 3D printed scales. But in terms of toughness, I would prefer the G10, of course. So then I replaced, and this is heavier than wood G10 is. Because I will be using this in tough environments, wood splitting, chopping, etc., I decided to then take off from the MH-001 and put it on to the MH-015. And I returned the original scales on the MH-001. Beautiful. Both are beautiful knives. Now, my expectations were met. I did think that this would outperform significantly the smaller father or brother or whatever, and it did. And mainly, that is for wood splitting tasks, it is just because you have a longer reach and you can do wider logs or the same size logs where you're dealing with something about that wide. You only have tiny tip left to baton onto, whereas on the larger one you have a significant longer reach. So what other differences in terms of the blade geometry? They're identical. So let me measure the blade width on these two, as they are different in millimeters. 30 millimeters for the MH-001 and 34.6 millimeters for the MH-015. Switch it to inches for my US audience. 1.36 inches for MH-015 and 1.18 inches for the MH-001. So this outperforms in wood splitting as well as in chopping tasks, simply because it is a longer blade. What I do appreciate, and I've already mentioned this on the outdoor shots, they do not have a secondary bevel, and that I think would be easier for sharpening as well. You can use something like a belt sharpener, a Canonian, or maybe something cheap like a Harbor Freight 18x2, I believe the belts are. By the way, there's a YouTube channel called Peter Built Knife Guy, and that guy pioneered using a cheapo Harbor Freight type of $50 belt grinder to sharpen a lot of his blades. Most of these will be probably convex or micro convex, but he sharpens and he does demonstrations of how well he sharpens his blades that way. So you don't really have to shell out for a fancy sharpener. You can also do it there with a cheap belt grinder belt sharpener. The other way to sharpen this is just to use this flat side, but I suspect you will be messing with this satin finish, and it's probably just best to strop it from this side, sharpen it from the convex side using a belt sharpener if you can. If you can't, then you can also use the fixed angle sharpeners and sharpen it on the saber ground or flat side, and then drop it from, I guess, both sides you would have to strop it. One thing that I want to note regarding the sheath is the sheaths are different, and right away I will say that I liked the first sheath much better than the second sheath, the MH-015. Several reasons. Usually when I don't like something, I change it, I modify it. I did not feel the need to modify anything here other than I just made this belt loop wet and I pressed it in my special foam that I use to form Kydex sheath sheen. And once it dried, it had this shape, because when it comes to you, it will come with this huge loop, and that's absolutely no issue. You can form leather. You can make this wet, use lukewarm water, and then you can even put a couple of poops on here, leave it for a couple of hours, and once it dries, it should be something like this. So why I'm saying I do like this sheath better is simply because of the retention and the fact that it has a belt loop. What happened here, Muthos Homura, why did you omit the fire steel loop here? Because it was very useful, not just for the fact that you place the fire steel in there, but when I open up this belt belt loop, right? The fire steel catches onto it, so I don't cut it when extracting the knife. And then in terms of the retention, this has good retention. Even though it does not have such a pronounced choil, it still has, it serves its function. And then this overloop, what this does is so that this doesn't flap too much on your belt. In the case of the new sheath for the MH-015, there's nothing to pretty much hold this loop, so you maybe see touching already. The other issue that was quite disappointing is that this belt loop actually, see, do this slow. So if I move the belt loop over, clip, and then I can still extract. So this belt loop does not really do its function. A bit disappointing there. Again, fire steel loop here would be nice. Maybe you can do it on your next batch of the MH-015. And also the fact that this has a longer and heavier blade section, this will flop around significantly more than the shorter one. So why not do the same thing here? Another belt loop that would just basically the same thing that you've done here. This works. Good formula. I don't know why you changed it. Also, this solution of this belt loop looks aesthetically much better than this. I didn't really like this variant too much. The rest of the leather quality, etc., identical, very good leather, nicely tanned, and looks to be full grain. I don't know what exactly, if it's cowhide or what, but it is good, nice feel leather. So no questions there. Just a belt loop here and a fire steel loop would make this sheath much better. Currently, I am thinking to upgrade and do a Kydex sheath on this, and I do have a request from my viewers to do a video on making a Kydex sheath. I've recently upgraded the Kaiser Smolt to a completely different fixed on, glued on handle, which makes this a very nice usable Puko style knife. And I'll be making a sheath for this for sure because I need it, and maybe I'll throw in bonus on this knife as well, make a sheath. Now, moving away from the good stuff, a little con is that I currently see this knife priced at $528 US on Amazon. That is not Muthos Homura's price. That is Trump's price and all his tariffs. So it is unfortunate. It applies not only to Japanese products, but even more, I believe it applies to some Chinese products where the manufacturers are now struggling and they're trying to keep the prices civil, but everything has gone up. So previously, this was around $450 on Amazon, I believe, before the tariffs. If you go to the Muthos Homura site, it sells for around $160, $170, but once you convert it from the Japanese currency. But if you then have to ship it, you'll have to do customs clearance, etc. Probably goes up, I don't know, depending on where you're ordering from. For Europeans, it'll be much cheaper, but for the US market, $528. Do I think that's a good or competitive price for the knife? No, I don't. And again, this is not the fault of Muthos Homura. They're not controlling that situation, and they are actually selling the knife for a lower price. They just have to mark it up for the US market. Now, on its performance, within this thickness, I have a couple of convex knives that are actually even thicker than this. So they're convex from both sides, but I enjoy wood splitting, batoning with this much more. I think, in my personal experience, this asymmetrical grind performs better than a dual convex or in general convex knives that are convexed from both sides. Just the mechanics of how this behaves once it goes inside the wood, I think is genius, and they've done a great job. And because they were so successful with the MH-001, they took in feedback, all the little gripes and feedback from the users, and they came out with the MH-015. Great knife, very satisfied. If you can get it for a normal price, I highly recommend it. As for the steel composition, I didn't get specifics from Muthos Homura on what steel they're using, but they're claiming high strength stainless steel. What they did say is that the steel is very similar to LMAX. I don't know if it is LMAX, if it's close to LMAX, but in my use, I have not had to strop the knife. It is quenched sub-zero heat treatment to 60-61 HRC, and I've banged on both of the knives. I tried to do the usual tasks that I would do. They have not dulled yet. I have not even had the need to strop them. So quite happy with that also. These are great knives. Both of them will be staying in my collection because I love special and unique blades and products in general. Both are just up there, high grade, high performing, and one-of-a-kind blades, or I guess I should say two-of-a-kind from the same company. Now, if you like this kind of content, knife reviews, watch reviews, flashlights, EDC gear in general, please make sure that you subscribe, hit that notification button so that you're notified when I make new uploads. Stay tuned, share the video if you think your buddies and friends would be interested in seeing this, and have a good one. Stay safe. Cheers.